Brand is tough to measure. How do you gauge? And I know you can maybe seek some outside sources or even recommendations of tools or other things you can use. How do you gauge if your brand is successful, if it's alive, if it's thriving? What do you look for to determine if you're succeeding?
Especially like measure of success is going to be, of course, conversion. You know, the leads that you're bringing in, converting into clients, but that's only the starter piece. I think retention is the huge thing to focus on, because while, you can deliver something, if you don't give a great experience, or if you don't meet SLAs or deliverables.
The mistake that a lot of business owners make is they want their name or their logo or their colors, or their website, they want all those things to wear way too many hats and do too many jobs.
We'll do monthly review reports, see where the core problems are, if there's themes, and relay them back to certain, conversations that we've had with customers, go through calls, go through emails. Like, where are we missing the mark? Where are we falling short?
Welcome to another episode of SEO on Air. Today, we are going to dive a little deeper into brand. And I'm really excited about this because I think it's really become spotlighted in the AI world that we're in today, that brand and the story that a customer has is so much more important, I think, than it has been in the past, or maybe just as important, but being recognized a little more than it has been in the past. So today with us, we have Kesley and Lynn. I'm going to give them each a chance to tell us just a little bit about their experience and who they are, as well as their agencies. And then we're going to dive into a few questions that we hope to unravel and teach everybody a little bit more about why brand's so important. Kesley, if you don't mind starting, tell us a little bit about your history and your agency.
Sure. My name is Kesley Smith. I am the Director of Marketing and Business Development at Zoke Marketing. We are a full stack digital marketing company that focuses a lot on websites, SEO, PPC, graphic design, and branding, things like that. I also head up our partnership division. So I create all the referral partnerships, white label partnerships, enterprise partnerships. We're partnered with brands like MindBody, Paychex, things like that. And a little bit about my background is that I've always had a love for marketing and storytelling. I have been a natural writer at heart. And when I finished my MBA, I went into the publishing industry where I was head of marketing and business development there as well. And I worked specifically with authors in the nonfiction space to build a powerful brand. A lot of them coming in had already built a powerful brand, but more of the branding aspect to make the book sell. So what drives them? What is their story? What's going to make them a little bit different? And so I take everything that plays into that, into my marketing strategy, into my relationship building, how I create strategy, how I create relationships, create partnerships, because I feel like that connection, that branding aspect is what's going to make someone or a company the most memorable. We remember people, their story, their resonance, rather than just what they're selling. And in a world where people are being sold to every 5 seconds, that's extremely important. So I'm super excited to talk about this.
I'm excited to learn. Lynn, please tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Sure. And I love what you just said, Kesley. I hope we can come back to that because I feel like we're just on the same page about so many things. So my name is Lynn Tickner. I'm here in Columbia, South Carolina, and I own a full service branding and marketing agency called Ink and Key. And then I have the cartoon version of me at myname.com, lynntickner.com. And, but I am a story brand certified guide, meaning I use a framework that helps people pay attention because we use the power of story and narrative in our marketing. And I've been doing that since 2019. And so what I do is I help businesses fix scattered marketing by creating clear, simple, repeatable sound bites they can use everywhere. So if you're wondering, do we need that? Then I like to think about, your marketing and your business kind of as a car with some warning lights and a dashboard. And so if you go to your team, for instance, and you ask everyone, what do we do? And you get different answers from everyone, then that's kind of like a warning light that's blinking on your dashboard. And that means you have a messaging problem. So what I do at my personal brand, lynntickner.com, is I teach private messaging workshops to help align teams around that one clear message. So instead of being confused, customers remember you, so that when they're ready to buy, they think of you first. Because if you have a confusing message, people don't know what to grab onto and their brains can't hold on to who you are. And so they're not going to think of you whenever they're finally ready to solve that problem that you actually can help them solve.
This is fun for me. I got to pick the guests for this podcast recording session with the intention of really focusing on brand. So selfishly, I was in the process of trying to understand a little bit more about the acts of marketing. I've been building a website myself, thinking about the messaging and the flow and all of that. And the conversation around brand has been so much a part of that it's really fascinating for me to bring in the brand expert and the website side of things and really put you together and build something that I can selfishly learn from. So I'm thinking about the many other people in the world that are in the process of starting their own companies and all the other things that go into building an agency or building a company out. And I really feel like we have a cool opportunity to learn from you too. So thank you for being here and thank you for being guests. The first part of this, the first question that I want to dive into is jumping right into AI. And I'm going to read the question just verbatim here. It says, if AI can now produce decent websites, logos, messaging, and even strategy, there's now like a leveling of the playing field to a certain extent. So now brand feels like it's really, really important, where it's like one of the few differentiators that can really stand out. And I want to just know, like, is it being commoditized? Like, is AI commoditizing it? Or do you really feel that companies can stand out today with a real true brand message? I know I'm almost feeding you a softball, but I think this is a really important starting point.
Well, I'll kind of dive in, and then Lynn, feel free to just, jump in wherever. I think with AI, I think it's a great tool that can be used to improve efficiency and productivity. But if we're looking at brands that have been so successful, it's not because they tapped into AI, and it's because they had a very memorable story. They had a very memorable presence. They had a memorable product. They had a very unique value prop. And so I think with the overuse of AI and it almost negating a lot of that think pieces that goes into creating the foundation, I think that's where some brands are going to get into trouble, because now with, starting a business and things like that, and with industries being so hyper saturated, the brand and the resonance is really going to make a big difference. Like I mentioned previously, we're being sold to 100% of the time. There's targeted ads, there's retargeted ads. You're seeing it everywhere. Where people remember your product, your brand, is the story behind it, the relationship you build, the credibility. And so building that foundation, building that brand authority is still going to be so important, even if you're using AI tools. But AI is not going to replace the necessary factor of the human connection and what makes brands memorable.
Agree, 100%. Yeah, I mean, it's the human connection, because, everybody goes around saying your brand is not just your logo, but there still are business owners that believe that their brand is their logo and their website, but it's so much more than that. And just Kesley, just like you were talking about, needing that human touch, how you make people feel. Like, as a brand owner, and kind of where the buck stops here with me, because I'm the owner of the brand, I focus really hard on how we make our clients feel. We are very high touch. Like, I have a current client who is a functional medicine doctor. She's building a beautiful big practice. And so we're helping her build out her new brand in all the ways. Yes, we're doing the visual brand and the logo, and we're doing the website and the messaging, but it's so much more than that, because you have to start with empathy. And, of course, large language models don't have empathy. They can pretend like they do, but they don't really. And they also, AI cannot tell you what your brand should stand for and what your brand believes, and that's where human touch, you can't replace it. Because, a little story that popped into my head, Kesley, when you were talking about that, is, thinking along those lines of, a brand is how you make people feel in the long run. And like, they might buy from you, but they're not going to come back. if you make them feel icky or manipulated or whatever. There's someone now who I will not name who is a very big name. And years ago, while she was kind of in the process of getting big, I was able to guest on a little sort of a podcast thing that she was doing. So I was able to have a conversation with her. She did not make me feel good. Um, she was short and kind of just not kind. And it didn't make me feel good, that interaction. Even though we completed whatever this was that we were doing together, I did not walk away feeling seen, heard, understood. When someone's impatient with you or they kind of talk down to you, it doesn't make you feel good, right? And so even though she's a really big brand now, and maybe she was having a day, whatever, I get that. I haven't forgotten that. But I also haven't forgotten the other people that I've worked with that do make me feel seen, heard, and understood. Those are the brands I go back to.
And to kind of tack on to that point, something I always say is it's a very well-known saying, but I do repeat it in the marketing sense, is that you only get one shot to make a good impression, right? And so when you are creating relationships with people, when you're talking to clients, when you're talking to partners, if you come at it with your intent is to pitch, sell, it just seems transactional. It does not seem authentic. You need to really dig into what problem are you solving for this person? What are their goals and how are you going to make that happen for them? Like going back to the website and the digital marketing piece, while website and branding is so important for a business, it's what I like to think is your digital business card, right? It can get people to your door, but it's not going to get people to walk in unless the story is there, unless the conversion path is there. And especially if you are a relationship-based company, like a lot of SMBs are, a lot of SMBs will target, local SEO and paid ads, and that will work really well for their business. But where they really stand out is the relationship building aspect. What makes them different? What makes them powerful? What makes them retain clients? Is it the service? Is it the product? Is it the value prop? Because when we're looking at Super Bowl ads, because we just had the Super Bowl, and my favorite thing to do as a marketer is obviously rank the Super Bowl commercials, we always remember the ones that had such a strong story, like the psychology behind marketing. The Budweiser ads always do extremely well because they hook that emotional nuance to them. And they're always so memorable. It's either funny, nostalgic, or, it pulls on the emotional ties. It has ethos and things like that. And where brands lack that, and where they lack that first impression, either from the first client call or the first time visiting the website, it's something that needs to be there, or else, consumers are smart. They have a lot of options. They are going to remember someone. If you're networking, they're going to remember someone who took the time to learn about them, what their goals are, not just go up and be like, "Hi, I'm Kesley. I sell websites. Do you need one?" And so really understanding someone's need and someone's positioning and someone's problems and how you are going to solve that with your solution and make it a more of a partnership, a solution-based, ordeal, more than just something that feels transactional, because that just makes people feel cheap, unheard, misunderstood. Like you were saying, it was, the one time, but you still always remembered that.
I want to ask another question here regarding like the use of AI and just kind of how you guys are talking about this. It's such an emotional, it is appeal. I think the saying that comes to mind is like, people don't remember what you say, but they remember how you made them feel. And that feeling that you remember for a very long time. But now with brand being something that people are trying to do through AI, and this is funny for me because we've seen it with SEO as well. They'll build their full strategy out and they'll say, "Hey, just execute this for me." What are the biggest mistakes that companies are making right now when they trust AI for that brand? And I know we've kind of briefly touched on a few, but I want to kind of get a list out here. What are people doing that's really hurting their brand that they aren't recognizing as they're asking AI to build it out for them?
They're using it as a replacement, not a tool. That there's so many things that are happening, and they're using it to replace something instead of using it as an efficiency tool. And I think when used correctly, it can be it can be so great for efficiency, for productivity, and the way that you use it. But now, especially when you go onto LinkedIn or when you go read blogs, everything just feels so cookie cutter the same. I want to read something that's going to make me feel inspired or make me want to take the next step. And if you're just listing off, what we do and how we can service you without identifying your core value prop, your positioning, like if you're just relying fully on AI for that strategy, yes, while it can seem polished and put together, it lacks the emotional depth that people put into their brands, the things that make them really stand out. And so that's where I think a lot of people are missing the marker is they're getting so consumed with getting things done rather than focusing on the core foundational pieces of what is going to make their brand memorable.
Agree. I have so many clients now that are relying on ChatGPT even to give us feedback. And it's kind of like, okay, you didn't even mean what you just said because, like for instance, a client in her ChatGPT feedback is referring to serif fonts and sans serif fonts. But then once my designer got on a call with this particular client, it turns out the client didn't even know the difference between serif and sans serif. It was all coming from ChatGPT, copy pasted, in the effort to move quickly. And it's just like everybody needs to take a few steps back here, and that's where you got to have the humans, step in and they, I love the use of, large language models, like ChatGPT or Claude as a thinking partner, but if you don't train your large language model to push back, and even if you do, it's going to tell you what you want to hear, and it's going to give you false information a lot of times. And, if a client especially is trying to replace, a branding agency and just do everything through AI, it's going to be generic and it's going to be faulty, and there's so many things wrong with it.
Confirmation bias is just the funniest thing in AI. Like you've built this brand out, you've chose these colors, and it's like that is like the most amazing branding colors I've ever seen someone use in my entire existence of being an LLM.
Yeah, no, it took me 5 tries today. I was working on something, 5 tries with, this is a model that I've trained, I thought pretty well, but still I was like, no, you're wrong. You're like, it was making stuff up, and I'm like, go back and look at this. You're 100% wrong. And it took 4 tries for it to come back and give me the right answer. So
I imagine even your customer going and asking it to assess one of your reports or something else could send the same report through 4 times and get different answers. So just the flavor of the day or the hour on whatever it decides is the problem with what it's looking at. It's kind of interesting. So part of that brand and that emotional connection is like really narrowing down who you're talking to. And that becomes complicated for a lot of companies that are desperate for success, whether it's generating as many leads and they need to get revenue and they have a mortgage or whatever else can be stressing them out at the time. So you tell them to narrow down their story maybe. When is it appropriate to really narrow down the story? Like when does the customer really understand how far they need to narrow down the story before they're really touching their correct audience? Because it's a complicated question, but that brand holding that weight where it ties that emotional connection to the buyer where they make a decision is sometimes a smaller net than the customer wants to cast. So that conversation around letting go of some of the dreams of what they may have envisioned their company to be versus what the brand needs to be to succeed is a complicated part of success. How do you navigate that conversation with customers?
I think the fundamental piece there, and I actually talked about this on a podcast a couple of weeks ago. When I work with brands or when I work with clients or previously in the industry, in the publishing industry, I really go down to the basics. Who is your ICP? What are their pain points? Like we learn in school doing a SWOT analysis or doing just like a general analysis on your ideal customer profile. And I feel like so many companies either skip that or now they're using AI to tell it to them for them, right? And so the most important thing about your brand is, why is your brand important? What is going to make people, if you can't tell me that, then how are other people going to buy from you? If you can't tell me what makes you unique, what makes you different than the other brands that are out there. Why should I buy from you? If you can't tell me that, there's your first problem, because that means, and I understand, especially in very high growth stages like startups or small businesses who are really just trying to get the ball rolling and really focus on bringing in clients, bringing in the revenue. However, that can backfire pretty quickly when, you see hyper targeted, targeted ads and the cost per click go up in your industry. You're not getting people quite like you used to. And I think when building a brand, building a business, or even growing a business, you need to go back to the basics. And it seems so simple in theory, but a lot of people miss this fundamental step. And it's something I see all the time when I ask, who is your ideal client profile? What age are they? What are their pain points? What are they looking to solve? What are you going to solve for them? What makes you different from the agencies they're looking at? What makes you different from all the competitors in their space? And really having them think about that instead of plugging it into ChatGPT and having it tell them what it is. What is it that makes your brand different? And again, it seems so fundamental, but fundamentals are what build a strong brand. And when you skip the core steps, not saying it can't work, but you will start to see stagnant growth when you start to grow in certain areas, like targeting new places or doing a new branding campaign, when you don't even know what your positioning is. Something's worked for you in the past and it really gave your brand a boost, and great. That well has dried up. And so now you're looking for an alternate strategy, and now you're having to go back to the basics. So I think starting with the foundation of what makes your story important, what makes you different, because like I said previously, consumers have a ton of options we're being sold to at every second. You really need a strong value prop to make your business stand out. And if you don't know what that is, or if your team all has different opinions, like Lynn said earlier, that's, car lights going off that something is fundamentally wrong in the structure.
Yeah, 100%. And I think all those questions you said, Kesley, we ask the same ones. And I love the process of brand strategy as we're beginning to build, because it's almost a little bit like brand therapy, I think, because it's, going through this process. And, as a story brand guide, we have very specific questions we ask about, what is the problem that you solve? And they want to say, we solve 50 problems. And it's like, well, what's the main problem you solve? Or, who is the client you want to serve the most, and what's the main problem you solve for them? Because we can get to all the other details later. There's always going to be multiple things happening, but, helping them to focus on one thing and then figure out what are the words you're going to use to talk about that. And as we start digging, a lot of times we'll find out, oh, well, this person doesn't even have a clear offer, or their offer needs some work, right? So it's just, it's like a puzzle, putting the pieces together. So it's not just finding out, who is the main character in the story, which is not the business owner. And that's a big mistake that business owners make, is they position themselves as the hero of the story. They talk all about themselves. I started my company, in 19 whatever. And it's like, no. People don't care, but they want to know, can you solve my problem? And so we help them become Obi-Wan and Yoda, and we help them be the guide, and so that they're focusing on their customer as the hero, Luke Skywalker, right? Because the hero is the weak character in the story. So you actually don't want to be the hero. You want to be the guide and invite your customer into a story about them, not about you, but about them, in which they win the day and they go through a transformation. So, kind of the summary of when I talk to clients about this is, let's figure out what is the transformational story that you invite your customers into. How do you help them transform? And if they can figure that out, then we can get into the points of it, is like, what do you believe? What do you stand for as a brand? As far as this, marketing shouldn't be this hard, or we believe this, and it's everything is towards the customer. It's just, we believe you deserve this, and we can help, and we have empathy, because a guide always has a balance of empathy and authority. If you have too much of the either one, everything's going to go wonky. So you have to make sure you've got both. So all those sort of things are really important.
There's a Star Wars joke in there about only Siths deal in absolute, right? That's the. I think that it's interesting the way you took the question, because it led us into this next question really well, because getting stuck in your own story, in your own head, and believing that you've really communicated everything on the website and that the customers are just idiots if they can't figure out what you do because you told them exactly what you do. Yet someone else could go to your website and really not have any idea what you were trying to say or how you would solve their problem. So the next question I had for both of you was, if you stripped away the logo, the website, the messaging, what evidence is there that the brand still exists in a company? Because I think this is a deeper view of what that brand really is, minus all the shiny stuff on the outside. Tell me your perspective of brand without the shiny covers.
And I think kind of what Lynn said, it goes back to the customer. It goes back to the client. And you're going to be, if you strip away the website, if you strip away the logo, and you have built a great foundation of creating thriving partnerships, wonderful relationships, you have a great retention rate, you are going to be remembered for the service and how you helped grow a vision, how you helped someone identify their core success, how you helped them, how you inspired them, things like that. And like Lynn said, when you focus on you, well, yes, that is important, especially when you're selling yourself as a brand, especially like when I worked with authors and things like that. Yes, while that is important, but the main piece is going to be what they are providing to other people. Why is reading their book going to help them? What makes them different? How is it going to help the reader? What is the reader going to take from it? It's the same thing with marketing and strategy and business to consumer. If you just focus on yourself and what makes you great, while that's nice and it looks great and you might have a great story, if people aren't coming to you and if you don't have the credibility, the authority in the space, the social proof, if you don't have that relationship building technique, that connection that is so important in business nowadays, if you strip all that away, again, what do you have? It comes down again to the basics. And I feel like so many people skip the part of connection, especially in business, either being in high growth mode or just with now the availability of all these tools. And now, we're even seeing it as a consumer, like everything, I call it the grass is greener syndrome. Like everything is like one click away. You always think there's going to be something better. And it's really focusing on that aspect of what is great about your company that is inspired people, that has helped companies grow, that has helped them identify their vision, and focusing on what you do, how you serve, how you solve problems, instead of making it corely about you, then I feel like that's where things are going to shine brighter, especially with companies that are super successful and they built their foundation off of referrals, off of relationship building. And I think that's so important. And it's such a fundamental piece that people really don't always think about nowadays, because there's so many of these high-tech tools that they're like, if I implement this, my leads are going to go crazy. But I mean, you can get leads in the door, but honestly, they stay with the company based on their experience and based on, yes, the product and the deliverables and things like that are all very important, but they remember the people they worked with the most, especially.
Yeah, relationships, how you make people feel. And, this too, the answer to the question, about what evidence would you have that proves a brand exists, is it comes down to messaging. If you have your messaging in place and what you say about your business is consistent across the board, and you have these, what we use is 5 clear, simple, repeatable sound bites. If you have those, you're equipping your customers to talk about you. So even if you don't have a logo or a website, you talk to customers and they're all saying the same things about you. That's because you've given them that language, easy, clear, simple, repeatable language. So they can talk about you to other people and help other people remember who you are, so that when they're ready to buy, they'll think of you first. So they'll give you referrals. And so it's all about verbal consistency, right? And also just, it's customer language, but also just a practical way is go look at reviews and here's a good use of AI. Take all of the Google reviews and ask AI to create a spreadsheet with themes. Like, what themes do you see that keep popping up over and over in this brand's reviews? And you'll see, the main things pop up and bubble up to the top, and that would be the proof of the brand, whether it's landing well or not.
Something to your point earlier about going to a website and not knowing what they do, I think kind of goes back to the piece of positioning the customer rather than yourself, because while you know your brand really well, especially us being in marketing, we tend to use a lot of marketing jargon naturally, just because we're a marketing agency, we understand it, but that doesn't mean it's landing with the consumer. And you have to really scale back and understand that you may know how to talk about your product, your service, ins and outs, everything like that. But if you're explaining it to someone who doesn't know what it is or how it's going to help them, it's all just going to sound very confusing and it's not going to land well with them. And so I think going back to the piece of positioning the client and the customer as the focal point rather than you yourself or your story is going to make a huge impact as well.
Yeah, it's that curse of knowledge, and that's why it's important for brands and even for us as marketing people. Like, when I'm doing my own stuff, I get outside help, because you have to have a set of outside eyes, because we're so, involved in our own stuff. It makes sense to us, and it's hard for us to know what is a high cognitive load for someone else might be low cognitive load. It's like, we don't have to think about it. When we say SEO, just, I was in a conversation in a committee the other day and I just said SEO without thinking about it. And someone else was like, what's SEO? And I was like, oh, this is what I preach and I'm not practicing it right now. Like, I was using insider language, and so it's just so important to everything you say. Low cognitive load, talk to a third grader or fourth grader. Not that your customers are dumb, but just because, our brains are always trying to survive and thrive, right? And they're also tuning out anything that doesn't have to do with their survival. And so if you can help people understand, first of all, that it's what you're saying is very clear, but also that what you're saying has to do with their survival. And the only way to do that is talk about their problem and how you solve it. If you're just talking about yourself, that has nothing to do with me, I'm going to tune you out because I got other stuff going on,
So that brand, stripping away everything else, it's like alive to a certain extent, right? Like, the brand lives through, like you mentioned, I think even reviews was a really fascinating way to look at it. Through word of mouth, through reputation. It's all stuff that's kind of like this living through society organism. And I like that, Kesley, as you pointed out too, there's a lot of work that goes into that brand that you can't just artificially inflate with an AI tool, right? Like, you can maybe get ad space and you can get eyesight, but that brand that lives internally is like a big thing that's really hard to quantify. So I want to ask a really, really tough question, because I'm thinking about, we're running lower on time on the podcast. So this might be my final question here, but brand is tough to measure. How do you gauge? And I know you can maybe seek some outside sources or even recommendations of tools or other things you can use. How do you gauge if your brand is successful, if it's alive, if it's thriving? What do you look for to determine if you're succeeding?
I think there are kind of multiple facets to that, especially where I am in the industry. Especially like measure of success is going to be, of course, conversion. The leads that you're bringing in, converting into clients, but that's only the starter piece. I think retention is the huge thing to focus on, because while you can deliver something, if you don't give a great experience, or if you don't meet SLAs or deliverables, they're going to start looking for someone else to fulfill that need. And so I think retention is going to be the huge one to look at, because you can bring in leads all day. And if you have a strategy that's, bringing in tons of leads, that's fantastic. That's great. But if they're not sticking, if they're not staying, that is a core fundamental piece in your strategy that is going wrong. And so I think, especially being in a very high growth stage, you sometimes forget that aspect because you're growing so fast. And so you're starting to, hire more and, leads are coming in, but then you're not seeing them stick. You're seeing that retention fall. You're seeing more churn. And so with that, it's really important to take a step back and realize, okay, we are failing somewhere. where are those fundamental pieces? And we do the same thing, with companies and even with ourselves. We'll do monthly review reports, see where the core problems are, if there's themes, and relay them back to certain, conversations that we've had with customers, go through calls, go through emails. Like, where are we missing the mark? Where are we falling short? Because while we still delivered a great product, if they're just purchasing one thing and not staying with us, then we're not doing our job as a company, because that means churn is still going up. You might be increasing leads and increasing revenue, but on the back end, that churn, those cancellations, like those are really going to impact the business model and impact your stage of growth and impact your overall goals, because those fundamental pieces are, like we said earlier, like the reviews, the service and everything like that. On the partnership side, I get people referred to me because of the service I give and, the support through the partnership process, and knowing, yes, I deliver a great product, knowing our team can deliver, but actually having someone they trust, that they've worked with, that they know can deliver what they want, is going to really set you apart from just, bringing in all these leads. And while, yes, that's great, retention is going to be the huge piece. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer.
I think it's got us both thinking, though. It's great.
Yeah, I'll take that question from a different perspective, because Kesley, you covered that so well. One of the things I didn't mention that we do is, and this is part of me saying what I do, but also associating it with the answer to the question. So I have an 18-person naming team, and that's actually how I started my company, as a naming agency. So if people need to name a business, do a rebrand, or name a product, we have a very clear, really fun process, all self-service on my website. You can just start a project today, and it's really fun. We work with a lot of other agencies, because you probably relate to this, Kesley. Most agencies do not want to deal with a naming project because it's such a pain. And so they're like, send them over to Lynn. So in my community, my story brand community, especially, people associate me with naming. Okay. And so I have trained people as like my personal brand, as like, I'm the naming person. Anytime, anywhere, and this has been going on for years, somebody would say something about, oh, I got a client that needs a name. I get tagged like 20 times. Lynn Tickner, because everybody's trained to associate me with naming. That's like this little niche that I hold in our community. And that's brand, right? Brand is helping people associate what you do with the solution to the problem that they have, which in this case would be, we need a name for this or that. And the other way that I think about this question is, especially if I'm trying to explain things to clients, if they need, if we're just specifically talking about the part of brand that is the front door, the name, or the logo, I talk about it like a bowl, right? So the question is, there's so many right answers to name and logo and colors. It's not like black and white. There's only one right answer. You just have to pick something, right? So does this name, does this logo, do these colors, do they have the potential to hold what your entire brand is going to become? That's how we look at it and approach it. Because like, for instance, a doctor that I'm working with now, her clients are stuck. They don't care what her brand colors are. They're not going to think for a second about what her logo looks like. They don't care. They just want to know, can you help me? And so you have to just make sure that you only give your, for instance, name or logo, just one hat to wear. You can't make it do everything, because it's obviously, as we've been talking about brand, your brand is way more than your logo and your colors and your name, so much more. But the mistake that a lot of business owners make is they want their name or their logo or their colors, or their website, they want all those things to wear way too many hats and do too many jobs. And so I think part of clarity that comes for business owners is realizing all the different parts, the different moving parts that become their brand, whether it's name, logo, website, messaging, copywriting, social media, all the things. And there's so much more. All of those things play a part, in your overall brand. And it's just understanding what each part plays, I think, is part of the key. And, coming back to relationships is, what you were talking about, Kesley, is just, are people going to keep coming back to you? That's just absolutely key. If your brand is working well, they're going to keep coming back. If they're not, then little warning light there.
Taking this with what I've learned from you guys on the podcast today, because I'm thinking about brand and how I defined it. And I think it's interesting the depth that you've both given it from like the emotional standpoint. And a saying that comes to mind is one that I really like, which is charisma is not about how much people like you. It's about how much people like themselves when they're around you. And I think of that brand being such a, like, it is charisma, it's character of your company, and whether or not you have something that people want to be like, want or are attracted to, or if you're just broadcasting your name out, hoping that people like it. That's a very interesting view that you guys have opened up for me that I really appreciate. So we are out of time. That was my last question for you guys. Yeah, Kesley, go ahead. If you have anything else, please share it. We'll wrap up when you.
I always say too, you can't force connection. So while you were saying like charisma isn't about how much people like you, it's about how they like themselves when they're with you. It's kind of, it goes back to, you know, when you're around someone, do you feel energized? Do you feel your energy is depleted? And it's the same thing with working with someone you really trust. Like your gut is going to tell you, you know, if you're going to really like working with this person. And I think that's a huge fundamental piece, is like, you can't force connection. And, you know, the emotional aspect, and remembering we're all people and relating to people on a human level, and understanding that we're all learning, we're all starting from somewhere. We might be, you know, the experts in marketing and brand, but we're working with someone who is the expert in their own right. And so understanding what makes them tick, what makes how we can solve their problems, what makes them important. And so just going back to that piece of, again, connection and that fundamental relationship building, I think is really important. Whether you do it digitally or in person, it really needs to stand out, and it really needs to seem that you are trying to make a connection and not force something that's transactional.
That act of giving goes so far too. I think it kind of aligns with what you're saying as well. When you give something, it's crazy how much that connects with someone. Lynn, did you have anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up?
I think I'm good. You just mentioned that sense of reciprocity. Yeah, that's big.
Yeah. I will share that I get to talk to a ton of really amazing agencies on the podcast. And when I thought about like my wife's PT practice and the stuff that she's working on, I was like, well, who would I work with? Like, I've worked with so many amazing like agencies that it does come down to who you had that emotional connection with, because in the end, you know that they're all really doing good work. It's who you connect with and feel like can understand you the best that you want to work with for the long term. So I really find the brand has opened up today for me. I appreciate it, guys. Well, we'll wrap up there. Thank you for being guests of SEO on Air. We hope to have you on another episode. Thanks, guys.